So I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar activity titled Climate Adaptation in Agronomy with Satellite Technology. This event is being recorded, and so you'll be able to watch the recording if you haven't been able to get in due to the technical issues we're experiencing this morning. I'm going to hand across to Thomas first for an introduction to Agri-Tech Week.
Thank you very much, Sam. A warm welcome to everyone here, and a massive thank you to our host Pixelytics, and to the speakers, Ben from ADAS, Eric from Lacuna Space, and Danny from Sarah's Research. Thank you so much for being involved in what promises to be a great session. This event is the first of 11 sessions of our 12th annual Agri-Tech Week, and I'll just share a slide. Bear with me 2 seconds. Right, can everyone see that? Great stuff. So this is our flagship partnership program designed to celebrate and connect the communities across the entire ecosystem. And I'm proud to say it's officially our largest program yet. We've got a good range of events this week, including other online sessions, farm walks, workshops, and facility visits. And upcoming, we have our annual REAP conference. So this is on November the 4th at Kingsgate Centre in Peterborough. We're very pleased to feature Minette Batters, ex-NFU president, as our keynote speaker. And during the day, we'll have a technology exhibition, a startup showcase, research into practice session, and a farmer panel. There's still some tickets available, and I'll put the link for the REAP in the chat for you in a second. For those of you who are perhaps less familiar with us, Agri-Tech is an independent, not-for-profit membership organisation. Our core mission is to bring together and connect the key communities in the sectors, farmers and growers, tech developers and researchers, and the technical and professional service providers, which is in the UK and beyond. We're all about collaboration. So just finally, and again, a very special thank you to Sam, Andrew, and the team at Pixelytics for all their hard work in putting today's event, and also to the speakers. Agri-Tech Week is delivered and curated by committed members, and we couldn't do it without you, without the support of our partners like you. We're truly proud to have Pixelytics, ADAS, Lacuna Space, and Sarah's Research as part of our network. So if you're interested in joining us, I'd be happy to discuss Agri-Tech membership, and do look out for my email address in the chat. We'll also be sharing all the event proceedings from the whole week on our website next week. So thank you very much, and back over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to start with a brief introduction to the project that I'm working on called Space4Climate. But I will first show an overview of the actual agenda for this morning. So all these timings are in BST, which is GMT +1. And so we're starting off with the welcome that you've just seen to the Agri-Tech E. And then I'm going to give a short presentation on the findings so far from the Space4Climate Market Breakthrough event. Then we'll have a series of 3 presentations looking at the use of satellite imagery, the Internet Things and satellite communication and data management. And then we'll go into a panel session with Q&A, and following by closing and summary. So in terms of the project itself, this webinar is being organised under. It's a Space4Climate Market Breakthrough project. So the aim of these projects are to really see what might be the barriers to entry for people taking up and using particularly satellite imagery in our case. And so we've organised this webinar as part of Agri-Tech Week, And we will also be having a stand at the REAP conference to further support engagement. And Pixelytics is joined by partners in running this project, Environment Systems, ENN Consulting, and Remote Sensing Applications Consultants. And we are funded by the organisation Space4Climate, which is open to anyone joining who's interested in the nexus between space and climate activities. So the starting premise of the project was that satellite imagery, which we tend to call Earth observation, is a resource that the farming community could benefit from, but there are gaps in the uptake. And this is the second phase of this activity. So the first phase, we organised events where we talked to representatives from the farming community and started to understand what the issues might be. And in this particular phase, we're looking at what we're categorising as the last mile. So those who are involved in interpreting or providing services or support to farmers. And we believe it's through supporting this last mile supply chain that we can support the broader farming community to make the most of what's available. So in order to gather information, we've been attending agricultural events over the summer. There is a 2-minute survey, and Andy is going to put that in the chat, and he might have to do that several times depending when people are joining. So that's still open if people want to provide input to that. We're also conducting one-to-one interviews, and as I just said, we'll be attending the REAP event, and we're also looking to organise an in-person showcase in January as the final activity as the project ends. So this is the survey so far. So this is a combination of in-person discussions with people filling it in and also online. So we've got input from the farming community, but also the broader sector supporting them. And from the 3 types of satellite data or usage that we queried the community over, if we go to the very right of the screen, then in terms of satellite navigation, that is what most people are aware of, and maybe not surprisingly, because people are using that a lot for their equipment in terms of positioning knowledge. We then come to satellite communications, and that's certainly starting to also become very rare for the community, I think, because of systems such as Starlink providing communication in rural areas. And then the third, which we have in the middle, is the satellite imagery. And that has less awareness, but I think we were very pleased to see that there is still strong awareness in the community. And then, so when we went to ask further questions, so is your farm, business or organization using satellite imagery? We had a group that said yes, which is our lightest color here, which is, as you can see, over 50%, which was good. And then there was a fairly large group who said no, but also a don't know. So if you combine the don't know and the yes, then we're not doing as bad as maybe we thought at the start. We then asked for what was the type of services that people are using. And the 3 largest, we have a field size calculation, field mapping and on-tractor mapping. And then also, as a reasonable size, we have habitat monitoring as well. And certainly from attending the agricultural shows, we saw a lot of interest from those now increasingly getting involved in habitat monitoring. And they could see particularly the benefit of allowing to look backwards in time. So these are just some examples of imagery that I have used over the years of different spatial resolutions. So we've got some worldview imagery here, which is the type of very high resolution data that you would pay for, but also the Copernicus data that is free to access. And this is a farm I worked on in a project historically back in a few years ago now, and we were looking at the growing of vegetable crops across the field and where variable nitrate fertilization would occur. And then we also bought data as well from a Korean imaging system at the time, ComSat3, and that was the one we ended up using in real time. Because we could actually get them to target the field when we wanted them to, and you can see different crops at different stages of growth within the field. So other questions that we asked were, what are the barriers or obstacles to uptake? So there is still a lot of problems with awareness and lack of awareness, and a perception that it can be too expensive, as well as needing specialist knowledge or maybe time, or there's a need for training. And in terms of the perception of the products and services that are being used, we have a large sector here actually thinking that they can have a purpose and can support what are the current methods used. There is maybe some perception that they're only relevant to large farms or for the government type large scale activities, or too expensive, or maybe that they are good but they're not used or not trusted at this stage. So these are the type of barriers that we now want to explore further, and we're hoping that through the webinar today you will start to understand some of this information. And I have my final image here down on the bottom, which is actually a microwave, a radar product from Cosmos SkyMed, where you can see through clouds, which is often one of the issues in the UK. So that's my brief introduction to our project and how we have been starting to look at what the barriers might be. I will go back to the very first slide. So this is the aim in terms of the slides that you're going to and presentations you're going to hear next, and we'll hand over to Ben next, who's going to look at real world applications for us. So I will stop sharing.
Okay, thanks, Sam. I'll share my screen. So hopefully that should come up. You see that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll just set up notes. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk about one particular sort of real world example of applications of satellite imagery into agriculture. So this is a project called PSAT, where we're using satellite imagery to predict yield in vining peas. This is also something I presented on at the set of talks last year, so apologies if this is sort of a bit of repeat ground. But this time I've tried to sort of focus a little bit more around the climate and sort of the linking up with satellite technologies, so that there's a little bit of new ground there as well. So this is a project that was started November 2023 and part funded by the European Space Agency. And here we're working with a partnership with HMC, a pea grower cooperative. And so one of the challenges that pea growers have is that there's a small window of typically 1 to 2 days when vining pea crop is fit for harvest. And then following harvest, the crop has to be processed within 2.5 hours for freezing or 4 hours for canning. And if it can't be harvested and processed within this time, the crop is often bypassed or wasted. And so vining pea growers work with processors to try and manage a continuous and even supply of peas into the processing factories, but all the grower groups tend to budget for a proportion of bypassed crop, typically around sort of 7 or 8% per year. And so this challenge represents a market opportunity where we can sort of address this and sort of reduce that proportion of bypassed crop. So how can we do this? Well, we can manage an even supply of crop to the factory, and we can do this by forecasting a harvest date so that we can estimate when the crop is ready to be harvested, and then also try and forecast those harvest volumes as well. So HMC already have a harvest date prediction model, and so this project aimed to sort of add that sort of volume element to that prediction service. And so across the UK, there's 15 grower groups covering around 34,000 hectares. And so if we can help to reduce that amount of bypassed crop, of which the 5-year average is around 8%, if we can reduce that to 6%, then that can be a huge savings across the UK and for the sector. So going on to sort of the growth of the crop. So peas are typically a sort of cool season crop and sort of are best grown in spring and early summer. In terms of the limitations, heat waves can cause quick maturation and poor pod fill. They typically require at least 6 hours of direct sunlight daily, and prefer consistent moisture, especially during the flowering and pod development period. And so that's why this year, in particular for 2025, there was a particularly poor harvest. So the UK experienced its driest spring on record, and so this severely limited soil moisture, which is essential for pea development. It was also the warmest June ever recorded, so that accelerated crop maturity, forcing an unprecedented early harvest. And so these heat waves can compound the stress on crops and sort of shrivel the pods and lead to fewer peas per pod. And so if we look and compare this year with last year, which 2024 was a particularly good season for growing, and there was decent yields across the season. So this shows the period of May, June, and July, and in that sort of May and June period is sort of peak flowering and pod setting, and so at that point, adequate moisture is essential for that pod filling and seed development. And so in between those two sort of dashed lines, that's sort of that 150 days to 170 days, which is sort of that period where 2024 there was a decent amount of moisture available, and then 2025 there was very little rainfall, and then sort of beyond that as well, sort of the late crops begin maturing, and also rainfall during this time supports pod development and prevents premature senescence. So there was still sort of less rain at that period as well. So as I mentioned before, predicting yields can really sort of help both manage the crop, but also sort of in that harvest period as well. And so as part of this project, we wanted to develop a yield prediction service. So here we worked with 5 years worth of data, so provided by HMC. So initially 2019 to 2019 to 2023. We now have data for 2024 and 2025. So here they provided field boundaries, the crop variety type, and dates of activity, sort of planting and harvesting, and also the final yield. Then sort of across each of those seasons, we looked for satellite imagery to find cloud-free imagery. And so for each of those field boundaries, calculated a whole range of vegetation indices. Then also sort of incorporating weather data. So this was both used to estimate crop development based on temperature through the season, and also rainfall throughout the season as well. So on the right here, we can see a graph of temperature over the season, and then the purple line shows the accumulated heat units. A heat unit being the number of degrees above 4.4 degrees Celsius. And so different varieties have different requirements or sort of target heat units before they're ready for harvest. And sort of the growers use this to sort of manage their timings and get that even supply across the season. And so yeah, we use this to get an understanding of crop maturity. And so we were able to sort of look at that planting date and the sort of potential harvest date, and sort of look at that difference to understand how far along the season it is at any given point. And so at the time of any imagery, we can understand how far ahead or how far through the season it is, and try and identify that best period. So looking at this graph here, so this is a correlation so the correlation on the y-axis is the sort of quality of relationship between the final yield and I think it's the optimized soil adjusted vegetation index. And so the relationship between that and final yield. And so as we go through the season, so along the x-axis, looking at maturity, that relationship gets better and better, sort of up to around the sort of 60 to 80% through the season is almost the optimum, and then it falls down a bit. So we can sort of focus on getting our imagery around that period to sort of get that best prediction of yield. So combining that that weather data that we have, sort of the temperature, we also looked at radiation as well, and as I mentioned, precipitation, which is very important, and then that whole range of vegetation indices as well. We looked at a range of machine learning models to train the data on and carry out a prediction. And so we did that using the 2019 to 2023 data, and then tested this as well on the 2024 season. And this gave a strong prediction of yield. So the x-axis there is our sort of best prediction of yield, and then the y-axis is the sort of actually measured from the crop. And the dashed line is the black line is the sort of one-to-one relationship that we're looking for. So the limitation here, as sort of Sam mentioned, there's a lot of limitations around imagery, particularly around cloud cover, and so here we were only able to get that prediction for around 50% of the fields, just because of that cloudy season that we had. So while it's good for rainfall, the clouds are over, and so we're not able to get that prediction. So we're also looking at sort of higher temporal resolution data as well. In terms of the next steps for this project, so we're looking to take the prediction model and integrate it into a digital farming platform. So the platform that currently manages field maps, cropping information, weather data, and satellite imagery, and so we can easily integrate that into the service. And then this service will work to make those predictions as they sort of are created, simultaneously available to the growers and processors to help sort of that management of timings between the two of them. So some final sort of conclusions, sort of going more broadly, I guess, in terms of in terms of this type of service, this can really help with climate adaptation through this predictive insights. So the services can leverage satellite imagery and weather data to anticipate yield outcomes and enable growers to adapt. It can enhance that decision making for growers, giving accurate yield forecasts, and growers can optimize harvest timings and allocate resources efficiently and help to reduce waste. It can also help to support sustainable agronomy. So this is non-invasive and very scalable as well to monitor crop health and development, so reducing the need for sort of resource-intensive field surveys. It can also build sector-wide resilience, so yield predictions can inform supply chain planning, contract negotiations, and sort of policy development as well. It's also very scalable and transferable. And so while we've focused on vining peas here, the methodology can also be used in other crops and also other regions as well. So this offers a good blueprint for sort of broader climate adaptation strategies in agronomy. So thank you very much for listening. I'll now pass back to Sam, I think, at this point.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was great to hear that focus. So our next presentation is Eric, and we're now going to look at the Internet of Things and satellite communication.
So, hi everyone, are we okay on the screen there?
Yeah, if you just want to go into full presentation mode.
How's that?
That's great, thank you.
All right, well, hello everyone, and thanks so much for letting me join the conversation today. My name's Eric Hewitson. I'm a business development manager at Lacuna Space. We are a satellite operator for the Internet of Things, which means we do sort of the other side of the satellite world to Ben, which is we look at getting data from the ground and sending it up to low Earth orbiting satellites, and then bringing that data back down again and getting it into people's phones and applications and desktops, etc. So we're based at the Harwell campus in Oxfordshire, which is the sort of centre of the UK space industry. And we build and launch satellites. Well, we build satellites and SpaceX kindly launches them for us. And this is the Transporter 14, which went up in June with 2 of our satellites in the nose cone there. And these satellites are orbiting at around between sort of 500 and 600 kilometers up in space. They're traveling at around sort of 27,000 kilometers an hour. That's approximately 7 kilometers a second. So they rotate going north to south around the poles. And as the Earth rotates beneath it in a 24-hour period, a single satellite is able to be above your head at some point during the day. So you get an opportunity of a few minutes to then send data from a device, from a sensor on the ground up to the satellite. And just a sort of quick span of what a low Earth orbiting satellite is. These are the ones that are close to the Earth, and Starlink is a low Earth orbiting satellite network. They've got 8,000 satellites. We've got 7 satellites in orbit. So we'll have at the end of this year when the 4 launch 4 more we launch in November. So Starlink is providing internet connection. It's providing the service that used to be done or is still being done, but by geostationary satellites. Geostationary satellites are the size of a bus. They're very expensive to launch. They're 36,000 kilometers out, but they can see the whole of the Earth or half of the Earth, if you like, in one go. So they can give this sort of continuous connectivity in that way. Starlink's doing that by having thousands of satellites available. But to connect to a Starlink, you need to have power, and you need to have the cost of their hardware device on the ground, their unit on the ground, and the data fees are pretty high. And that's because you're streaming Netflix and you're connecting to the internet and doing those things. And that's great for connecting, giving connectivity for farmers and people working in remote locations in agriculture. For giving them internet access, but it's not that useful if you were actually wanting to get data from the fields, which is more of a spread out kind of data. It's data from multiple points around a farm, and that starts getting difficult, especially if you're, say, an Australian farmer who has 1 million hectares or 1 million acres, which we're working with a farm in Queensland that's got 1 million acres. So the farm house has got Starlink to give it connectivity for the internet, and that's where it can see its data, but and obviously access the internet, but it's using sensors around the farm, and those need to be powered at super low power, and that's where we come into it. So connecting sensors in agriculture at super low power and low cost, which enables you to collect data from around farms. So that's just a visualization of what a low Earth orbiting satellite kind of system looks like. So on the right, that's one of our satellites. On the left, this is a device called multi-node. So this is the device that you can connect to various different types of sensors: soil moisture sensors, NPK sensors. You know, if you're managing water, if you're managing all sorts of different things, which I'll come on to in a bit. That's the device. As long as that flat top surface can see the sky, it can send data packages to the satellite. And these are small data packages, so we're not streaming Netflix here. We're just sending 50 byte packages of data. Where am I? What's the temperature? What's the flow? Am I on or off? These sorts of values. And you can collect those frequently across, you could collect data every hour, for example, bundle that together and send it when the satellite comes overhead. And of course, the more satellites we have over time, as we build up our constellation of satellites, then the more frequently you can start sending data, the more data you can get up. And so the more use cases become possible over time. Now, just wanting to talk about this why is this needed at all? You know, why can't cell coverage cover everything? And the truth of the matter is that 85% of the Earth's surface has no cellular coverage. So, you know, if you're over the oceans, if you're over the deserts, if you're over the poles, there's no cellular network available to you. And most people, even in the UK, will have experienced, you know, going out into a field. I remember being at the Cereals conference just outside Cambridge a couple of years ago, trying to exchange a LinkedIn contact with somebody, wasn't able to do it, even 5 miles outside of Cambridge, one of the global homes of wireless technology. There was no coverage. So you look at a country like Brazil here, and you can see that the coverage is about 40%. It's probably even less than that. It's very patchy in parts. Obviously, the Amazon itself, there's virtually no coverage because there's no people. And this is the problem, because cellular companies are not going to put in infrastructure because it's expensive to deploy unless you've got lots and lots of users who are prepared to pay you monthly fees. Well, we're talking about this very low cost, very low power connectivity in remote locations. And so we solve these problems for agriculture. So what types of things can we connect to? So we're doing an awful lot of things with soil moisture monitoring, crop health in general. So we're working, for example, with monitoring black sigatoka infections in banana plantations in Ghana. So it's absolute wide range of possible use cases, but grain storage, livestock tracking, feed monitoring, all these sorts of things that where more data is going to help us with increasing yields, with reducing inputs, and with maintaining sustainability. So soil moisture monitoring is one of the big sort of areas that we've found. There's, you know, perhaps there's a potential to have a lot more data in this sector, mainly because of this problem of remote locations. So tracking soil moisture for crops in remote locations is really tricky to do, but there is a big link between productivity, yield increase, and water reduction that can give a really good return on investment model in certain circumstances. And it's probably not for every crop, for sure, but for high value crops, especially for root crops, we're finding it's really got some great uses, things like sugar beet, for example, and also for people who are doing research, whether that's in academia or whether that's sort of big seed companies who need very accurate data, soil moisture data or NPK data. They're finding that deploying with satellites is just much easier than setting up a local area network or having this sort of having to be a kind of electronics wizard. With a satellite connectivity, you can just deploy a sensor and then get the data in your application at the end. And lots of statistics here, which I won't go into, but just to say, these images at the top here, you've got Centec on the left, DFM next to that, and then on the right, Delta T from Cambridgeshire. These are soil moisture companies who have terrific sensors. We don't manufacture sensors ourselves. We work with those sensor manufacturers to provide the connectivity in the remote locations that's difficult to do. That means you don't have to go up to the device and take a reading, and you don't have to set up some kind of clever wireless infrastructure on the ground in order to collect the data from sensors. You can simply deploy your sensor with the satellite connectivity, and then you can move it, shift it around wherever you need to, and you don't have to worry about, do I have coverage or not? You've always got coverage as long as you can see the sky. But one sort of statistic out of this that just, I mean, I've no idea how many billions of tons of soil there are in the world, but 43 billion tons of soil being lost annually seems like a worrying statistic to me. And there's probably the only, well, among the solutions that we can bring to solving some of the headwinds we've got in agriculture in terms of trying to feed 10 billion people rather than 8 billion people over the next 30 years on the same amount of land, is getting high quality data that can help us to manage these things. So yeah. And what does that data look like? Well, that comes in the form of data, graphs, visualizations, etc. So in a sense, you have the sensors themselves, you have the connectivity, which we look after at Lacuna Space, and then you have the data analytics side of it. And this is where the agronomists take over and the farmers take over, because they understand what all of this means for their particular land, for their particular soil type, their particular crop they're growing, and that this is here to support that knowledge that's already exists, of course, and it's just to support better understanding of what's going on and complement practices that are already taking place. So another area we're working in is livestock tracking. Somewhere between 1.5 and 2 billion cattle are out grazing in fields, and understanding where they are, what condition they're in, are they moving, does that movement give you an indication of the health of the cattle? Virtual fielding, managing cattle in that way is really important. We're working with a company called Movement to give satellite connectivity to their ear tags. So that's all things coming down the line. It's very difficult to do this in a cost-effective way because the margins are quite thin. If you add $100 of technology to a cow, you're losing a big chunk of your profit on each head. So this has to come down to very, very low cost and very, very low power, because you can imagine the power has to be managed on the ear tag itself, and those 4 little rectangles at the bottom there, they're solar panels to do just that. Another fun project we've been doing in this one's in Cornwall, monitoring beehives. So temperature, hive weight, humidity, these are all factors that establish the health of a hive. And if you can monitor that across seasons, across years, you can get a good picture of how to get better performance out of a hive, to monitor and manage things like the Varroa virus. And these are all key key factors for not just for obviously the production of honey. In this case, the production of queens. So these little small boxes on the left are actually for creating additional queens. So the hive separates quicker if it's in a smaller box. All of these factors help in the production process for hives. Here we've got a multi-node actually sitting inside the hive, taking temperature and humidity readings. We also worked with Bayer on this project and developed a hive lid monitor as well. So adding together multiple factors, temperature, humidity, weight, and the interaction of humans with the hive gives you a much stronger model to then predict pollination levels moving forward. And then the last use case I'll just share with you here, which is a project we did with Wild Networks, who IoT company satellite IoT company also based in Cambridge, that we work with and we provide connectivity to. They worked with DFM technologies, so this is soil moisture in date plantations. And these are in very remote locations where water resources, this is in Namibia, water resource was very limited. So always looking to see how can the commercial date farm reduce the amount of water that they're inputting, but also obviously not affect the yield. In fact, increase the yield is what you're trying to do. So knowing the soil moisture at depth could really help to improve that. And some beautiful models were being built around that. And that's done here. You can see at the bottom of the large pole in the middle, this is the soil moisture sensor. Then at the top, the satellite connectivity piece, and that gives you a sense of the sort of remoteness and the scale at which this sort of technology can really come into effect. So here's just lastly a few examples of other things that we can do. So weather stations are definitely a big part of what we do. On the bottom left, we're monitoring soil moisture in peatlands in the UK. Leaf moisture, lots and lots of different things. So there's many applications of this technology, and please do get in touch if you're interested to find out more. But satellite IoT, its part in the agriculture data space, I think is going to be very important as we move forward. And back to you, Sam.
Thank you very much. That was great to hear and see the insights. And so, Danny, are you okay to give your presentation?
Yes, I will just present my screen. You will see that okay?
I can't see it quite yet.
I can.
Better connectivity needed.
I think that's the thing of today.
Has it appeared for you yet, Sam?
Yeah, it's just starting to appear now. There's
Okay.
a little swirling circle, so yeah, it's there. Great. I just wanted to make sure it was, so it would appear on the recording. All there now.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam. And again, echo what others have said. Thanks to Pixelytics and Agri-Tech for having us during their Agri-Tech week. It's great to be a member of Agri-Tech. So I'm just going to give a quick overview about Ceres Research. If you haven't heard of us, talk a bit about the data challenge, integrating data, turning data into decisions, and then looking a little bit at the challenges we see and potential solutions to do with connectivity and accessibility, followed by just some thoughts on where we're going with it. So in terms of Ceres Research and what we're about, so we're really trying to provide really good independent data-driven solutions for progressive farmers and related businesses powered by the latest research and data. So Ceres Research is a 4-strong person team, so we're still quite small, but we're a sub-component, I suppose, of Ceres Group. So Ceres encompasses Ceres Property, Rural, and now Research. Research being the latest part of this, and we've just almost celebrated our 1-year anniversary. So we cover many different aspects, from providing industry intelligence through to supporting research and development, technical training and analytical insights, whether it's through practical field-based analyses, workshops, events, new market studies, impact analyses, all of those types of things. And I've got a few examples there on the screen of the types of companies that we're working with, including Ceres Rural. And that sort of smaller image of showing the farming update, fields of the future, that's really encompassing our Ceres Research membership, which is focused on delivering those insights in a user-friendly way to those involved in the agricultural industry to make sure that they are keeping abreast with everything that's going on. So in terms of the data challenge, currently I think the data integration really matters, because we can generate a huge volume of data, and we've seen that through the previous speakers, but without proper management of the data, it becomes quite noisy and quite almost reverses the reason why you want to collect the data in the first instance, to actually provide you with insight to act upon. And also, there's a lot of fragmented data systems out there, whether it's looking at Excel spreadsheets to muddy boots and the gatekeepers, looking at weather data from Met Office, downloading shape files or land map applications. It all comes in various different forms. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that farmers face in terms of how do they manage that data to ultimately help them in their decision making. In terms of trying to sort of integrate that data, it's yes about collecting it, but it's integrating it, storing it, and interpreting it in a way that supports their day-to-day operations, long-term efficiency, and ultimately the resilience of their business. At the end of the day, farming is a business, and they need to make sure that it's viable moving forwards. KPIs, key performance indicators, and benchmarking is a really great tool to assess all of these different data inputs and sources to identify, the quality or performance of something, and identify how do we move forwards, how do we strengthen that, and resolve those to improve efficiency, whether it's physical characteristics such as labour, your machinery, the way you're using your land use, through to agronomics, and that's quite linked well with satellite data in terms of looking at those agronomic factors, as Sam mentioned before, yield mapping, the soil health, other farming practices, or whether it's also the financial aspect of looking at costs, revenue, and profitability. So moving on to some of the next steps in terms of turning that data into decisions. We're collecting and verifying it. We need to report and identify, and then we need to use that to indicate and inform the next steps. And here's an example here of assessing greenhouse gas emissions in farm production and identifying areas for reductions. So it was collecting and managing multiple data sources, whether it's looking at your fuel use, fertilizer, livestock, and many of those things are driven by satellites, looking at land use, for example, as well. And it's measuring different impacts on the crop productivity, your greenhouse gas emissions, nutrient use efficiency of your current fertilizer use, and integrating all of these different sources of data into what is essentially a recommendation at the end to further improve carbon emissions. Sorry, let me go back. And so this is just an example of one of the carbon emissions reporting that we've done, and the recommendations from looking at all these different types of data was looking at including more organic manures, precision agriculture of inputs to reduce initial carbon emissions, and then looking to the next steps of increasing sequestration, perhaps through hedgerow management or expansion, cover crops, or where appropriate, woodlands as well. And I think carbon accounting particularly is somewhere where it's really important that we need to be able to, yes, measure it accurately, but also it's really important for the traceability aspect. So being able to use that accurate data for different certifications and regulatory compliances, whether that's some of the environmental stewardship schemes, looking at buffer strips or drainage improvements on farm, it's really important to be able to measure it accurately and use that in traceability on farm. Another example that we at Series Research are really quite focused on is trying to move data from a less static being to a bit more dynamic and reporting it in a dynamic way so that farms can make improved, timely and evident decisions. So it's about integrating the different data sources, as we've said, whether it's sensors, satellites, and here we've got an example of one of our dashboards from our membership looking at daily rainfall reporting. It's then about interpreting it into meaningful insights and taking into account other factors, whether it's looking at your different spray programs and your applications into the farm, and then ultimately how is it affecting your yield, how do you compare against others, and what are the practical actions that we can try next time to maintain and improve productivity and resilience. And we're trying to support our farmers with this through using different API systems, so connecting automatically to other systems when they're updated with the newest and most frequent data to make sure that system is smooth and provides a really accessible and easily usable format at the end. So in terms of sort of some of the challenges that I see with this, there is a lack of interoperability between the different systems. As I mentioned, there's quite a few different data formats and sources and places where you store your data that actually perhaps we are still in a place where we need these to be speaking to each other a bit more. Part of that challenge is connectivity issues in rural areas. Eric mentioned that earlier, and it is still, you know, in this day and age, you think, gosh, well, everyone must have Wi-Fi all the time, but actually it's still a problem. You know, if you've ever called a farmer midday and they're out in the field, you're going to get a patchy signal and lose half of the conversation. So there are still some problems around connectivity. Something that's not been spoken about yet is data ownership and privacy concerns. So all of this sort of data management and sharing, farmers, this is a business at the end of the day, and farmers are really, they're really, you know, it's really important to understand where their data is going, how it's being shared, and what it's being used for. And the last one of those challenges, again, as Sam mentioned earlier, to do with sort of digital literacy and the training aspects. And one of the things that we are doing to support that is through online skills webinars for farmers and other agronomists or those in the industry, particularly because we are a data-led company. We're looking at, firstly, you know, go back to basics and fundamentals of data. How is it collected? How is it interpreted? How is it relayed back to you, for example, in field trials? You know, trying to support farmers with looking at a whole big range of data, because you can get lost in the data, but it's trying to support them in knowing what bits they need to pick out and what does that mean to them. We're always trying to answer so what does it mean for you in your next growing season, for example, that sort of question, as well as other skills and training webinars. So we're really trying to support on that front. Other solutions, the tools must be simple, localized, relevant, easy to use, whether that's using it on a mobile versus a laptop. You know, farmers are always out on their phones when needed rather than in the office looking at a laptop. Those systems need to be able to be used whilst they're on the go. Data sharing either needs to be optional or very transparently defined so that everyone is aware of where that data is going, what it's being used for, and how it can help either them or others. And as I mentioned, training should be practical and relevant so that it can be used out on farm from our perspective. So just on my final slide then, looking at the future, I think that satellite and sensors, they show us sort of the what, and then data management is showing us the so what and the practical action. What can I do with that in the next step? And that's really what we're trying to answer at Series Research, combining all of those different data systems and looking at what does it mean for that. And I think moving forwards, it's looking at beyond just managing that data, and actually it's about learning from it for next time and using it, as Ben sort of alluded to earlier, about using it to predict the future, and then farmers and agronomists are better able to become a resilient business because they're better informed about what they might be presented with from one season to another, which ultimately improves their resilience. Data management, as I mentioned, sort of it does unlock that technological application on the ground, but there's still those considerations about data and ownership. And something that's not been mentioned yet that we're also interested in is the utilization of AI-driven insights. So I know that sometimes it can be controversial about the use of AI, but I personally sit on the side of it's only as good as what data you put into it to begin with, and you always need to manage it and understand it and know how it's given you the output that it has. So I think I saw quite a good quote the other day that said algorithms provide the insights, but farmers provide the wisdom. And I think that's so totally true. And it really is about using it to your best benefit, because it can't just be done on its own. So thank you very much for having me. I hope that's provided a good insight from our perspective, and yeah, pass over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much. So I think it was great to have the 3 presentations giving us different aspects of the use of data within the agronomy and broader farming sector. I think, Danielle, it was an interesting point you brought up about AI at the very end of your presentation, and I wondered whether the other 2 speakers would like to comment about whether they see that as a positive or a negative, or a combination of the 2 for farmers going forward.
Yes, I'll have a quick word and then over to you, Eric. But
Sure.
yeah, certainly. I mean, sort of. Well, the model that I was talking about used sort of machine learning, which is a sort of branch of AI. While it's not sort of into those sort of deeper neural networks, it's still sort of one of those sort of circles of AI. And so yes, when we've got so much sort of data available to us, I think it's important to try and utilize that as sort of best as possible. But sort of, yeah, that is a really good quote, that sort of wisdom is still needed. And so I don't think we ever want to get to the point where we sort of completely separate the 2 and sort of what we're doing is a black box. And we still want that understanding of what models are doing, and yeah, garbage in is garbage out, and so sort of understanding that data as well is really important. But when we do have so much data, I think it does sort of it does have a role in my opinion, but it just needs to be sort of, I guess, stewarded in the right way.
Yeah, I think I would add to that that it's very much I see it as a tool, not an end solution in its own right, or at least not yet. Maybe one day, but right now, in the pre-AGI stage of AI, I think very much see it as a tool. The more data you have, the more powerful the AI becomes, because it's just so difficult processing large amounts of data in any other way, or that's certainly how it seems to me. I think one of the big questions here is around ownership of data and how prepared people are to share data. So, a farmer might think, well, my soil data is actually quite sensitive because I don't really want to share that. That might be, something that people are trying to sell me things, or markets might be affected by if they have too much information around what I have. But at the same time, if we have shared pools of data lakes, everybody's in on putting their soil moisture data into a single data holding unit, then that can be processed with AI in a much more intelligent way, and obviously a much more beneficial way for everybody. So I think it's a balance there between what's commercially right and what we can do collectively to kind of get the best benefit out of it. I have no idea what the solution to that is, but somewhere in the future we will find out.
Yeah, no, I think that's sharing is an interesting question, I think, as well, maybe into how people share data in terms of both formats and trusted entities to hold that data. Danielle, I don't know if you have comments on that.
Yeah, I think in my experience, I would say that farmers generally are more open to sharing data in smaller, more community workshop type situations versus, if it was a more, for example, UK-wide data sharing program, whatever that might look like. But I think it's more about the localized sharing and also being able to report back. So I think if they can then see the value of sharing their data, and then if that helps them with their insights for growing next season, then I think that's also opens up another door to sort of them seeing the benefit of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, farmers don't they'll probably meet each other down the pub and talk about, I grew this crop, I did this, I had that many kilograms of this and that many kilograms of that, or whatever it is that they did, because they're going to learn off each other, and that's the natural way of things. And AI is just a supporting tool to add to that. And I think at some point that sort of collective sharing of knowledge is just going to become too powerful not for us all to benefit from it. But just how it's monetized, how it's managed, it's a bit beyond me at this stage.
Ben, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, nothing too much beyond what's already been said. Yeah, I think it is the sort of, if they can see the benefit to them, if they're getting something back, it's very easy to sort of, I guess, sort of your data to go out there and sort of not be aware of either how it's being used or seeing the benefit, and it can sometimes just benefit the companies that are collecting it. And so I think as long as you can see, they see that return, I think they're going to be a lot more engaged and sort of happier to sort of contribute to the sort of collective good, as it were.
I mean, I'd like to see it become a point of profit. I mean, at the moment I'm working on a couple of projects in soil carbon sequestration. So the sort of the golden calf for this technology is if we can find a sensor that can monitor carbon sequestration in soil per acre. So you can put something in, can sample, work out how much carbon is just from deploy the sensor. Don't have to think about it. Farmer gets on with carrying on with what they're normally doing, but they get this data back, and then you have the ability to trade those carbon credits. If you can prove that you've sequestered carbon into the soil, you can trade those, and that becomes a point of profit. $50 an acre at the moment, I think, in America you can get. So then it becomes something of interest, that then sharing data, or then maybe there's a reason to do it if we can make it more of a benefit rather than a hindrance, or a kind of a way that farmers are getting told off for not doing the right practices, but in fact they're making money out of doing the right practices. Then there's some models there, but whether that actually comes to fruition or not, I'm not sure. But I think a lot of people are working on that idea, and we'll try and play our part where we can.
That does link round to another question that we were sort of debating, I think, in terms of the Space4Climate project, and the actual the farming community helping us to move towards net zero and climate adaptation, and being able to do those long-term aims versus the short-term, bringing enough money to keep going, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's too many unknowns at the moment. I think that's the trouble. But yeah.
Yeah, it is a difficult one, and I think there's a lot of I guess, changes in the market at the moment that I guess sort of farmers need to be aware of, either with, as you said, Eric, sort of the carbon storage side, that's a sort of option in terms of managing your land that way, to sort of BNG, to sort of food security and profitability, and sort of getting the right balancing act between all of those potential revenue streams ultimately is sort of really difficult. And sort of bringing in sort of the pressures of climate change and other things going on. It's sort of, and that's where data can help in terms of trying to get that understanding and sort of doing our best to sort of synthesize all of those different pressures to try and get farmers to sort of understand what's best for their land as well. Sort of and sort of every farm is unique, and their sort of what they want to do is sort of unique to them. So if we can get the right data and synthesize it in the right way to sort of help inform them to make those decisions around those pressures, I think that's where sort of a lot of this technology needs to go. And I really think satellite imagery and EO can help with that as well, either in that sort of, both in terms of that historic sort of sense, in terms of what's happened in the past is a good way to sort of know what's going on or what can happen in the future, but also in that monitoring sense, it is how well is the land doing, either as part of a sort of agri-environment scheme or in terms of a yield or sort of profitability side of things as well.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'd like, sorry.
Yeah, carry on.
No, I'd just like to stress that, you know, I think when data people come onto agricultural panels talking about data, I can hear farmers just kind of thinking, oh God, you know, really, you don't know anything about farming, mate. And I think it's really important that this world of sort of data in agriculture is complementary. I just want to stress that it's complementary to what is already going on, the practices and the understanding and the knowledge and the history and all of the rest of it. That said, I think, you know, there is a massive under-digitization in agriculture as compared to other elements of life, you know, urban elements of life, which are highly digitized. And that is just because of the nature of the beast. You know, that's what it is. It's stuff that happens across large expanses of land. It's complicated and difficult to do. It involves unknowns like, you know, is it going to rain in June? And, you know, when you're looking at soil monitoring, something like 25% of all irrigated land has some kind of soil moisture monitoring on it. So that's already a massive upside potential there of getting more accurate monitoring on that. Again, to do these three golden things, which is increase yields, number one, reduce inputs, number two, and meet sustainability standards, number three. But I would, you know, when you look at agriculture as a whole, it's more like 2 to 3% of soil is actually monitored. So there's a huge upside of data that could be used and could be of benefit to agriculture PLC global, in my view. But it is complementary to everything else that happens.
Yeah, Danielle, did you want to come back in with any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess when that sort of question started out around more sort of finances, I think it's really important to stress. You know, I've spent 8 years at uni in the academic side of things, and now I've spent the last year with Ceres looking more on farm, working more closely with farmers. And there is quite a disconnect between when you're in the academic side and the more, you know, soil focused research, less so applied. It has its importance, of course, and it has its particular focuses. You know, you're focusing on a tiny piece of a huge puzzle, and that's how we move research forwards in one aspect. But on the other, if we don't then apply it and bring farmers along with the journey, you know, being 1 year into Ceres research, I didn't quite fully appreciate how much farming businesses really do suffer from year to year with finances. It's not something that, you know, these great ideas come out from research, and then it's how does it actually fit in? The science is totally there, but how does it fit into a farming model in the next year, the next 5 years? And so I think that's, yeah, just a key thing to identify, I suppose. And again, as the guys have said, data management supports that in the long run, and then it's how working out how does it manage, how do you manage implementing it in the short term, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as we're coming towards the end of the webinar today, I don't know if anyone would like to make any final comments before we close.
I'd like to chime in for our international or Agri-Tech international audience here, because I think obviously we've been talking about satellite technology today, and satellite technology by its nature is a global thing. Whether you're looking down with Earth observation like Ben, or whether you're sending data up like Lacuna Space do, it is a global thing, and it's a thing you can do at scale. And in the case of what we do, it's something you can do at scale and at low power, and at low cost. And it is about finding, as Danielle said, the return on investment models for that. We're certainly finding in countries like Brazil and Australia, where you have farms that are many multiples the size of the largest farm in the UK, which I think is 10 or 11,000 hectares. Maybe you're looking at farms of 150,000 hectares in these countries for things like sugar, things like soy, coffee, cacao, bananas. These are massive crops, massive commercial farms, where small differences in the inputs of water, fertilizer, nutrients, etc., can make a big difference to the profitability of these farms and the ability to get low price food into people's larders.
Thank you. Ben?
No, nothing really to add from me. Just to say thank you for having me, and thanks for hosting, and thanks everyone who listens to this as well.
Okay, and Danielle?
Yeah, I would echo what Ben said as well. Really great to be in the discussion. Always up for a chat on data management and improved ways of using it to really drive the so what question. How do I use this to inform my next action?
Okay, yeah, no, I've really, despite it being a bit stressful this morning due to the technology behind the scenes, it's been I think a really good session. So everyone who's not being able to join in person, I hope you watch the recording and find it very beneficial. I will just put up the agenda again once more, just so you can see what we've had today. So we've had a series of speakers talking about the real world application of satellites. So we started off with satellite imagery in agriculture. We moved into the Internet of Things and sensors and communication, and then we moved into data management and came back round to satellite imagery as well. And so I found it immensely enjoyable to be part of this session. And I should re-say this is part of the Agri-Tech Week, organised by Agri-Tech, and this is the first of the events this week, and this has been an online session. There are CPD points for attendance. I'm not sure how that works in terms of the recording. Please contact us if you do want to provide your details to request those points. Thank you to everyone who listens both live and offline. And I don't know, Thomas, if you want to say any final words before we close today.
Thank you, Sam. No, it's been really good. Thank you very much for organising it, and thank you very much to Ben, Eric, and Danny. And yeah, no, thank you. And
Okay, thank you very much. I will end the event.